Aloha. Thank you so much for being here. Is the sound okay? Great, yeah, it sounds quite good. Thank you so much for being here. We're really thrilled for the opportunity to talk story, and this really is a talk story. I'm going to try as much as possible not to give you stock answers and stump speeches. This is an opportunity for us to have a real conversation wherever it's possible. Let me take you very briefly through the program tonight. We have Gerald DeMello, who is going to be facilitating the program, and the way we're going to start is that I'm going to sit down, and there are going to be several community organizations, leaders from community organizations presenting to me and to all of us about what's going on in East Hawaii. And then I'm going to give some remarks. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible, and I know there are a number of my staff people who will enforce that. And then we're going to try to open it up to questions. A couple of things about the questions. The idea is for my staff, both the people who live on the Big Island and the people who are in my Honolulu office and the people in my DC office, are able to start the process of working more closely with all of you. So I'll try to have answers where appropriate, but a lot of what I would like to accomplish is an exchange of business cards, us taking notes, and us beginning to more seriously work together. I don't want to give you a pat answer to every question you have. I don't want to pontificate wherever possible, and my staff will help again with that. But I would really like for this to be more of a conversation about how my staff can do better to help Hawaii Island to succeed. So that's kind of the basic framework. A couple of my ground rules are that we are respectful and that we try to allow as many people as possible to have their input, which means that I'd like questions or comments or expressions to be as brief as possible, just so we can have an opportunity to hear from everyone. And we'd like to make sure that to the extent that anyone hasn't yet been heard, that they get heard, so nobody goes twice until we've heard from everybody. And if and when, and I think we will, run out of time, we're going to try to take notes and get back to you in writing or on the phone about whatever your concern or idea may be. But let's get started. I'd like to introduce Gerald DeMello. You all know him. He needs no introduction. He is a good friend. He's a community leader. He's a facilitator, and he's going to help us run this evening. Thanks very much, Gerald.
Thank you, Senator. Senator gave us the guidelines that we'll follow this evening. And basically, again, as he had said, mahalo for a nice Hilo greeting. I think we have a very nice turnout this evening. And going forward, let me add to some of the guidelines, or I should say the housekeeping initiatives. At the table, as you enter, the registration table, I encourage you, raise your hands, registration table. I want you to note that there are cards available at the table. If you have questions, write them out. So at some point, we can get your feedback. If not, we can take them back with your address and get them back to you. So please, get those things done. Other housekeeping measures, I think after the Senator speaks, when we go through this, please raise your hand and use the mic. We'll have a mic up here. The acoustics in this room are challenging, so the mic will be very helpful. And by raising your hand, he can call on you and we'll have some kind of orderly fashion. And again, as he suggested, please be conscientious. A lot of people here give a lot of people an opportunity to ask different questions as we move forward. And the additional information at the table, before I forget, is about Senator Schatz's office. As he said, he wanted to engage the community, hear from you. It's an opportunity to have this rapport. So please, give us a sense for who you are, but also there's information there at the table that's going to be very, very helpful. Okay, that being said, I went around and made sure we had all of our people here that from the community that were going to share a perspective with us. So to begin, based on some feedback that the staff got from the community, we've asked a few people to share from their respective communities information that we can all look at, we can all be aware of, and at some point, Senator or all of us in our own way can help address. So with that, I'd like to begin with Dr. Harold Wallace. Where's Dr. Wallace? Oh, there you are. So Dr. Harold Wallace is with the Bay Clinic, and he's going to be talking about some of the health initiatives on the island of Hawaii and in the community. Dr. Wallace?
Hi, aloha, and good evening. I'm Harold Wallace. I'm actually Harold Wallace, not Dr. Wallace. I'm a health executive. I have a master's in public health and not a doctorate. So sometimes that gets a bit confused. I apologize about that. But obviously, for the record, we want to get that straight. They've already told me that I have 3 minutes to get my message out, and they're going to stick to that. So be concise and get out of the way is what I've been told. So I'll stick to that. There's 3 things, and I'd like to talk about the challenges. I'll give you just the 3 challenges that we face at Bay Clinic in the community, then I'll go through the details of each of those a bit. The 3 challenges are comprehensive health facility space is a challenge for Bay Clinic. Health information technology, IT, is a challenge for us, and also workforce development. It's very important. So. Going into detail about each of these, on a comprehensive health space for us, what we're talking about is a large comprehensive health site that pulls our Hilo sites. Not all the sites, because we go from North Hilo all the way down to the southern tip of Kau and Naileu. So just the Hilo sites. We have 4 sites here. We like to combine all 4 of those sites into a large comprehensive site. Now the advantage of that is same-day visits and also preventive care, where we would put an emphasis on screenings, mammograms, cervical cancer screening for women, and also immunizations for children. There's a lot of things that we can do to kind of head off things in preventive care. Also, for diabetes care, it's the usual suspects. Diabetes is one of the disparities that plague the community. We like to head that off. There's a couple things that you can do to stop that. We need a comprehensive approach to diabetes, not only just for internal medicine, but also from a standpoint of podiatry and optometry. We need to really tap into the things that are plaguing and that are affecting individuals in the community. It's really bad. So a comprehensive site, that's just one example. But there's a lot of things that can take place in a site. Leadership development from a standpoint of training development for the staff, and that kind of leads into workforce development. We do not have the specific labor pool here in Hilo. So when we deal with that, do we take it from the standpoint that we're going to try to bring in a bunch of folks from out of state or even off island in the neighboring islands? What we have to do is develop talent here in Hilo. So a workforce development center inside of one of our sites, we have to take potential talent that's here in Hilo and take that talent and develop it. That's the best way, okay? We can bring individuals in, but they're not going to stay. We understand that. So we want to take individuals that actually want to be here and develop the talent. That's the plan. We've tried other things, it doesn't work. We have individuals here that have the potential, but they haven't been trained. So when we talk about the services that are delivered and folks complain that this isn't done right, and employees say, well, we've never been trained properly. Well, at Bay Clinic, what we want to do is grow from within, okay? The next thing is health information technology, with a lot of initiatives that have been passed down from the Affordable Care Act with the primary care medical home and also with meaningful use. There's a lot of standards, compliance standards that are required on an annual basis. What happens with that, this is additional data that's on top of the data that you're collecting already, the existing data we're collecting. So what happens is your data storage is taxed. We have to have additional server storage, and we have to have additional systems that have the capability for us to be sufficient. Bay Clinic is doing a pretty good job as of now. There's a couple initiatives, primary care medical home. Out of primary care medical home, there's 3 levels, okay? Out of all 14 health centers in the state, there's only 3 health centers that have reached level 3 primary care medical home, and Bay Clinic is one of them. So we're taking the proper steps to move forward to put things in place to make this an adequate health center. We do know that the Bay Clinic isn't around, despite a lot of the past challenges. These patients are going to, just in a day, and just really just come into the emergency room of the hospital, and it's going to be a mess, as we know. It's going to tax it, and as taxpayers, we have to pay for that. We know that the hospital has to go and ask for a bailout, not just the hospital, but HHSC has to go and ask for a bailout every year, whereas a lot of things that are out of their control. Bay Clinic can help with a lot of those things by making sure that medical access is expanded. By building a large comprehensive health center, we will add exam rooms, specialty services, and also other providers that are needed in the area. So we have a plan to make things happen, but it's always the one killer that kills us, and that's funding. We need additional funding to put in programs, but not just asking for money not to improve programs. We have a detailed plan for the federal funding and state funding to put things together, and again, it's comprehensive medical space, health information technology, and workforce development. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold, for sharing and talking about how you're engaging our community to improve healthcare and helping with services. At this point, I'd like to talk a little bit about business initiatives, and we have our friend Chuck Erskine here from First Hawaiian Bank, but tonight I think he's wearing the hat of the Hawaii Island Chamber. Let's see, where are you? There you are. So I'd like to have Chuck come up and share your perspective with us and some of your challenges. You're free to use which one.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I wanted to thank Senator Schatz for allowing us, the Hawaii Island Chamber of Commerce, to present a few of the impacts or the issues impacting our island community, and to reach out to you for your continued help and support. The mission of our organization is to help business and promote the economic well-being of our island. We are the voice of business and represent a membership of nearly 700 individuals from over 270 businesses and professionals. First and foremost, and probably the most important, is our island's lack of access to quality health care. This issue is critical and impacts all the people of our island. It's not only difficult to find a qualified specialist, but it's practically impossible to find a family doctor. This issue and this issue alone can have an adverse impact both economically and socially. I can personally attest that when I moved my family from Kamuela to Hilo in 2009, we were unable to find a family doctor. And had I not had a connection in the hospital, I would have been without one. So to me, this is definitely a critical issue for our community. Therefore, Senator, we ask for your help and support, continued help and support, to speak with our state legislators about having a sense of urgency in providing the necessary financial support for healthcare here on our island. And to continue to provide funding for our hospitals and related programs. We need more doctors. Secondly, the economy continues to plug along slowly. Construction and related industries haven't fully recovered, and our dependence on federal construction projects and funding continues. Therefore, we ask for your continued support of funding federal projects on our island, such as completion, full completion of the Daniel K. Inouye Highway, research projects, and grants. We also ask for your continued support of the Pohakaloa training area, as well as the military. Lastly, the Chamber also strongly opposes the petition to designate the Keaho Aquifer as a water management area. We oppose this petition as this would interfere with our county's authority and require a much more arduous process at the state level for homeowners and developers looking to provide housing for our island residents. Approval of this measure would no doubt drive up the cost of real estate and essentially exclude many from obtaining the American dream. What's even more troubling is that the National Park Service has yet to provide any reliable data to support a water management area, and yet continues to press hard to have this petition approved. Also, designation as a water management area will effectively stop implementation of the community's vision called for in the Kona Community Development Plan. Obviously, these are only a few of the issues that we as the Chamber are following and supporting and impact our island community. And we look forward to hearing from you in regards to these matters. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chuck, for all your initiatives to move our community forward and to support the well-being of the community. I think we're kind of like moving pretty good in terms of our time. I just want to remind you, for those of you who came in, the sign-up desk is there. There's a card there if you have questions that hopefully we'll get to, but if not, at least we'll have them there that we can get back to you with them. So the hand went up, so go there. Okay, for our last speaker, we have Kawi Paleka Kama, who's with the Retired and Seniors Volunteer Program. And she will be coming forward and sharing with us some of those challenges. Kawi? There you are. Thank you.
Velina aku nei ia oko I keia ahiahi. Haolino au e hui a puka ia oko I nā pakahia pau a poe a pau. No laila mahalo oko a ke keena o Senator Schatz. In other words, hi everybody! Glad to be here and thank you. Thank you for this evening. So everyone has needs. Like tonight, I know I need a good night's sleep. Some of us might need a drink. But when I think about the needs of our senior population, I go to Maslow's model of hierarchy of needs. And there I can begin to understand needs in levels, in going from the needs that we need to basically survive to those that bring out personal fulfillment. And the theory also says that a combination of these needs must be met in order to enhance a person's life. So it starts with the very basic needs of food, housing, and health, and then all the way to a need to be a part of the community. So I'll be speaking on some of these challenges in our senior population. And in addition to addressing these needs and helping our seniors feel safe and stable and comfortable in their homes and or their communities, I'll be talking about some services that enhance individual lives through intellectual stimulation and socialization. I hope to offer some suggestions to our lawmakers and how they can assist us in addressing the needs of our kupuna. I am currently the program director for the island-wide retired senior and volunteer program where individuals 55 or older can come to us in the hopes of integrating volunteerism into their lives. I've been fortunate to go to a wonderful school from which I was given a lot of wonderful education and learned early on that for those who are given much, much is expected. And that has been reflective in my 16 years of human and social services, 9 of which have been in the Elderly Activity Division for the County of Hawaii. So let me continue by quickly talking about two areas of programming. Personal fulfillment program, those that are more intellectual stimulation, socialization, versus fulfillment of basic needs, housing, food, and health. So in personal fulfillment, we currently, and some of you may know, have elderly recreation classes. My program is part of the division that provides such services. We also have needs fulfillment programs, our Meals on Wheels that delivers meals to homebound seniors. I see somebody nodding, so good to know some people know about the services. Also assisted with adequate living environments, access to regular emergency and medical care through our coordinated services. These programs were started when the elderly population was not quite the size it is today. And so one of the main challenges is just accommodating the sheer numbers of individuals. Even the centers and facilities that these programs are conducted in were designed when the population was nearly half the size. Currently at Kamana Center, where we run a majority of the recreation classes, you know, we're filled to the brim. And then finally, our area of aging, it's our hope that we work with them closely to discern or discover some of the gaps in services. And they'll continue to need federal, state, county, and other program support. So in addressing these challenges, I and some of my constituents have come forward with some ways to address them. So one suggestion is proper and continuous assessment of the population, which is from 50 to 90. That's 40 years we get to be old, or I get to be old. And so there's an ever-changing dynamic in the population itself. Besides being a very large part of our population tower, it's very dynamic. And of course funding to support all the programs that first of all fill basic needs. And there's an importance to doing that because the theory tells us meeting the combination of needs in an individual will certainly enhance their life. And so meeting the basic needs will make the personal enhancement, personal fulfillment programs a little better. I mentioned Kamana Senior Center, we're filled to the brim. And that when those centers were designed, the population that's in place now was not there, and so they're a little small. Facilities are a little small. I idealize having a hub like that in every district, where not only for classes, whether it's for personal fulfillment or basic need services, but just some place that the seniors can gather. So we'd look at lawmakers to help support policy and anything that would facilitate the development of more centers, bigger centers. And I'm really appreciative and want to encourage the Senator's office, because I've had a personal experience with this, their continued advocacy support with current problems in the system. Thank you. You know, we've had individuals mention they've come to your office and gotten assistance with maybe a problem with a specific program or some service. We'll continue to need that advocacy. So in conclusion, I think it's because of the changing landscape of our population that we're going to require ongoing needs assessment. And we look to our area of aging to do that, and they're going to need to be supported so that they can in turn support us who do the programming. Because when we're able to meet those basic needs, then our programming will become more effective, more efficient. Also to have personal fulfillment programming and addressing the gaps in services, where sometimes we cannot please all of the people all of the time, but we should try to identify those situations where a need is not being met. And then adequate facilities and programs to accommodate the dynamos and the sheer numbers of the population. And of course, policy that would facilitate addressing what we will probably be talking about for another 25 years. I remember when I came first off into the division back in 1999, and it was, you know, we gotta get ready because the baby boomers are coming. And here I am back in 2014, and we're still going, gotta hurry up, the baby boomers are coming. They've been here. They've been here. And so we will probably be having these types of conversations with some seriousness for the next 25 years. So we appreciate any way your office can help us. And thank you.
Thank you, Kali. I just walked over to the table and there's still a lot of information there, constituent information that's there. So if you haven't had a chance, please get yourself this information because it's a way the Senator would like to keep in touch with all of you. And so it's another purpose for having this. And then speaking of the services you have, Kali, your Meals and Wheels serviced a lot of our families, countless family members, right, Melena? And that being said, there's meals there, so please help yourself to seconds and thirds. With that being said, I just wanted to take a minute and just say a little bit about our Senator. First of all, he has been serving on a lot of committees that are very critical and essential to Hawaii, that support Hawaii in many ways, you know, for our future. And I think what's even more significant is the confidence that his colleagues have to help or to assign him to some of those very, very strong committees, if you will. And I just wanted to note, I don't want to be long-winded, but I know he's not, so I just wanted to share with you, he's on appropriations, very significant. And he's on commerce, he's on science, but a lot of what we do here. He's on transportation, and as an island state, very, very significant. And the more I watch the news every night, I go, whoa, what's coming? I hope not. But Indian Affairs, the Ethics Committee, and interesting that he is 72nd in seniority in the Senate. And that's terrific, you know, because the whole idea of the Senate is built on seniority. So we have this young man, our Senator, who has many years to build even further for Hawaii. And I think that's very, very significant. And I know he's been working very, very hard on many national issues, and of course, a lot of local issues specific to us in Hawaii. But with that, I'm going to leave it to him to tell you more. So Senator Schatz.
Thanks, everybody. Before we move on, I want to thank a few of the folks that made tonight happen. First of all, Gerald DeMello, Gene and Bob Kawachika, Donna Hoshide, Sky Garden Restaurant, Earl Hatada, of course our community speakers, and I'd like to recognize also our two Schatz seniors. I think we have two of them here. They are seniors in high school. It's a program that we set up in 2013. I'm very proud of it. We have high school students from across the state who serve your community, but our office in that process. So I'd like to introduce you to Cheryl Lee Yamaguchi and Michael North in the back. We have, is there feedback on this thing? We're okay? Okay. I'd also like to introduce to you the Big Island staff of my office. And we have, for the first time, 3 staff people servicing Hawaii Island. So we have an East Hawaii rep, a North Hawaii rep, and a West Hawaii rep, excuse me, East and South. Everybody covers South. So, but first of all, Marlena Castro-Dixon for East Hawaii. Michael Zola, North. George Robbie Robertson, Nakona South. And I also have my Deputy Chief of Staff, Malia Paul, right here. my Director of External Affairs, Sarah Kopuiki, and my Communications Director, who this is her first time to Hawaii Island, so let's give her a warm aloha, Karen Lightfoot. So what I'm going to do to try to maximize the amount of time we have for conversation is I'm actually going to cover the committees that I sit on, and then cover, let me think, hold on, 7 quick issues. I'll go as fast as I can. But as Gerald said, I was just assigned to the Appropriations Committee, and there are subcommittees that have to do with appropriations. There are 12 executive branch agencies, and I've been assigned to 5 subcommittees. And if you combine those 5 subcommittees, you're talking about 3/4 of the federal budget. So I'm on the Labor and HHS Committee, the THUD, Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. I'm on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, and MILCON, which is short for Military Construction, and Veterans Affairs. And so between those committees on the appropriations side, I'm pleased to be able to try to work with you and bring resources home. Obviously, there is a challenge in terms of the federal budget, but there are still dollars being spent, and there are still worthy programs to invest in on Hawaii Island. So I'm anxious to talk to you about your particular initiatives and needs and see where we might be able to be helpful. My view is we should under-promise and over-deliver, but I do think that I'm in a better position to be helpful than perhaps I was 2 or 3 months ago, so I'm really pleased about that. The Commerce Committee is actually one of the really fun committees for a couple of reasons. First, it's almost the entire private sector economy. It's aviation, it's maritime, it's space, it's telecommunications, it's sports, it's the internet, and I think also, probably more importantly than that, it's one of the last bastions of real bipartisanship, because a lot of these, not all of these issues, but a lot of these issues are not particularly ideological. They don't lend themselves to us putting on our sort of battle armor and going after each other. A lot of times it's just a matter of what's actually going to work best for the private sector economy. So in aviation, that's a good example. In the telecommunications space, I'm now the ranking member, the highest ranking Democrat on the telecommunications subcommittee. So you can tell I love my committee assignments. I'm on the ethics committee, which is an honor, but I'm not allowed to talk about any of it. So, so that's all I can say, except that I'm honored to be on it. There are 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. It's actually the only committee in the Senate that has an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, regardless of who is in charge of the Senate. It is a truly bipartisan committee, really a nonpartisan committee, so I am honored to serve on that committee. And of course, I continue to serve on Indian Affairs and advocate on behalf of Native Hawaiian interests to try to make sure that we keep funding streams going for Native Hawaiian health and education. So that's the committees. Let me touch a couple of issues which I know are top of mind, at least for some of you. The Daniel K. Inouye Highway, the latest is this. We have applied, the state and the county have applied for what they call a Tiger grant. It's basically a competitive grant process, and we were unsuccessful as a state and a county in getting those dollars. The State Department of Transportation, that's the bad news. The good news is that the State Department of Transportation has decided to use a portion of the formula funding. So the formula funding is the money we get no matter what, on the basis of our population. And the state DOT is committing to finish the East Hawaii leg. I got a text, so I want to be a little careful about the numbers, but between $40 and $50 million to finish this leg through formula funding. They anticipate construction starting towards the end of this year. When governments say towards the end of this year, I think you can figure probably next year, but we're gonna work very hard to get this done on the East Hawaii side first. There are some landowner issues, and they're looking at eminent domain and condemnation to try to finish this out. On the west side, it's a little more contentious in terms of the prioritization of these federal dollars. In other words, there are some people who want to finish, who want to do more with Queen K than the last leg of the DKI highway, and that hasn't sort of been settled yet. But in the meantime, we're going to do our level best to try to make sure DOT and the Federal Department of Transportation provides the resources necessary to finish that. Number two, and I've been working on this perhaps more than I thought I ever would have, and that is the Albizia issue, which we all, I think, started to really understand how serious it was when the Category 4 storm hit this island. And we have been working with the county, we've been working with Springer, who is here, with the Department of Interior, the Parks, the National Forest Service, the Hawaiian Electric Light Company, and community members, including the Civil Defense Agency locally, to try to come up with a solution where we are realistic, where there is a sharing of funding obligations, and that we don't commit to cutting down everybody's Albizia tree, because we all know anyone who's ever either tried to do something like that themselves or paid for it, it's just not realistic that the government can take responsibility for everybody's Albizia tree. But there are certain areas where it's really the government's responsibility or the utility's responsibility, and what we're doing right now is basically mapping where those sort of high impact areas are and making sure that critical infrastructure is not threatened. We've gotten pretty far along, and our state legislators, Russell Ruderman and many others, have put in legislation to provide some state funding. There is federal funding already available. HELCO is actually in the course of their normal repair and maintenance trying to work on this, and the Hawaii State Department of Transportation and the county has been great. Most of our meetings have been at Civil Defense with Mayor Kinoy there. So we're working on it. We don't have anything to report except to say that this is a pretty big problem, and what we want to do is, as they say, measure twice, cut once. We want to make sure that we do this properly, but I also want to be as blunt as possible. This is not about call me up and we'll get your Albizia tree taken care of. It's a really expensive proposition, so what we want to do is protect critical infrastructure, protect property wherever it's possible, and also protect people. But we're getting there on the Albizia issue. There's another issue with the Puna Community Medical Center, and they have had to relocate because of the lava coming through, and as a result, they have a real cash flow pinch. And so I just wanted to let you know we're very much aware of it, and we're trying to prevail upon FEMA to try to find some resources to keep the Puna Community Medical Center going, because they made the decision to move, which made a lot of sense for the community, but that was not free, and they had to do it kind of on the come. So our job, all of us as a community, is to find a not trivial but not enormous amount of money. It's about $90,000, and we're working as hard as we can, but we need everybody's help in terms of brainstorming a solution on that. One thing on Oahu that I think was just really good news is President Obama today designated Honouliuli under the National Park Service as a national monument. This is the site where the large majority of Japanese Americans were interned during World War II. It is a dark chapter in American history. The other sites in California and elsewhere have already been put into the National Parks inventory. This was the last step. It's a proud moment. President Obama didn't need this story explained to him. He understands it. He understands it in his head and I think in his gut. And so I was really pleased that we're moving forward with that, and we will allow, from my perspective, my children and others to know what happened, and not 200 years ago, but relatively recently, that we actually incarcerated American citizens on the basis of their ethnic extraction. And so I was really pleased with that today. I'll wrap it up with one last thing. I was going to do 7, but I'm calling an audible and doing 5. I did want to mention this Keauhou aquifer issue. Because I do think the National Park Service has overreached a bit, and I think they're doing it because their instincts are the right ones and they want to protect water resources, but there's just not enough science to back up what they're suggesting that we do. And I am about community planning. I am about empowering communities, and the Kona Community Development Plan was quite an endeavor and quite a process. And there is affordable housing plan, there is a courthouse plan, and to the degree and extent that the federal government comes into our water commission and says, without sufficient data to justify it, you better stop this Kona Community Development Plan because there may be a point at which you will run out of water. We had to intervene and suggest that they move through a mediation process. It wasn't that we were declaring their concerns to be invalid, but we just wanted to have the county, the developers, the environmental community, and what they call CWRM, the Commission on Water Resource Management, get together and kind of just have a conversation. That is not the way it played out, and but there's still time for that. But I wanted you to know that I'm really aware of this issue and the impact that it'll have on what I consider to be appropriate development in the Kona area. So with that, I think we will open it up to questions, and I'm not exactly sure how we will do it, other than people can just raise their hands. All right, we'll start on the, so we're gonna go like, we're going to move that mic. Yeah. So Sarah, we'll move the mic over here, and then in the blue cap, followed by in the blue cap. Yeah. And then we'll keep going. And maybe what I'll do is, if I can ask my staff to sort of stack the line so I'm not trying to figure out who to pick. If that's okay? All right.
Good evening, Ms. Schatz. My name is Bill Tramwell. I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer, and my question is this. Congress has done a lot for the VA, the Choice Act that President Obama signed into law. That's great for veterans. Retired veterans, when we enlisted in the service or into y'all's support, we were promised health care. Nowadays it's called TRICARE. Back then it was CHAMPS. Here on the Big Island of Hawaii, we face a health care shortage, obviously. But last year when the company that manages TRICARE for this side of the country changed hands, they took away the TRICARE Prime, which is like any other health care insurance. You pay a very small premium, very affordable, and made a standard. We do not have the choice of Prime, and they didn't give a reason. So one, my wife is a school teacher, and I'm a full-time college student living on very limited means. On top of healthcare shortages, this is a very big burden on us veterans. So my question to you, sir, is what is, if anything, is Congress doing, especially the committees that deal with Veterans Affairs, doing to try to change this to give us the benefits that we were promised when we signed up for the United States Navy or the Army or whatever the case may have been?
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. We all appreciate it very much. I don't know enough about what happened in the transition to this new company and why they pulled the availability of, sort of a premium level health insurance. So let me dig into this, and rather than give you a pat answer and sort of a bunch of cliches, let me dig into this and see what's possible in terms of making sure that you get the health care that you deserve, and all the veterans on the Big Island and through Hawaii are able to get what they deserve. I have not heard this before, so let me dig into it and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if you can raise your hand, and then Sarah's gonna sort of make a line. All right? Okay.
Senator, my name is Dan Kama, and I have a question for you. It's in regard to the Veterans Treatment Court that has been created by Judge Ed Kubo on Oahu, and now we got it here on this island. The treatment court, I was trying to get the Veterans Medical Clinic tying with this treatment court. I'm asking you, do you support this for our fellow veterans as I speak? Yes or no?
Yes, I do. And let me just, I like yes or no questions, but let me elaborate a little bit, Mr. Kama, because I know that my staff has been involved with you, and there are some other folks that are doing some really important folks doing some organizing on behalf of veterans. And my view is that, between the Vet Center, and the Veterans Treatment Court and a number of the other services, that it makes sense to try to aggregate all of this on the same site so that you have the same facility, you have economies of scale, and you also have, if you're a veteran and you're trying to get, whether it be health care or job training, or if you need psychiatric care, or if you're having trouble in that space, that all of this should be in the same physical place so you're not having to bounce all around town. And so that's one of the things that actually I had a meeting at 4 o'clock about the possibility of kind of consolidating services in one space. It makes sense on the fiscal level, but it also on a human level. So if you need to get care, and if you need to get back on your feet or stay on your feet, that everything you need is in the same on the same property, and I think that's really critical. So,
Thank you.
Aloha, Senator. My name is Danny Lee. I live in KL in Pune. My question is this. Apparently now the secret negotiations on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is nearing completion, and the administration is, I think, going to ask for approval. But because, it actually has a potential affecting both national and local environmental and labor laws in a negative way, and because so far the negotiations have been very secretive, do you support total transparency, therefore oppose any so-called fast-track process by Congress and have a full open debate on this question?
I do support transparency in this space, and let me just kind of back up a little bit on this issue. I generally think trade agreements have great potential, but the way that TPP in particular and TPA, this is the Asia trade agreement that's being proposed, is being negotiated, is literally in secret. And remember that any trade agreement that the Senate ratifies supersedes, outranks our federal, state, and county laws. So if we have laws that protect our environment or protect the public health with respect to tobacco prevention or consumer issues or lead in products or plastics or whatever it may be, all of the laws that your Congress has made over decades, if there's any conflict between the law and the trade agreement wins. Okay, so this is not a trivial matter. And what I have communicated to the White House, and I'm usually with them, but not every time, is that that's not going to work for me. That I don't know what's in this agreement, so it's very difficult for me to imagine voting for a process that basically abrogates any authority I may have as a senator to make policy. So I continue to be opposed to fast track.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you know what future plans for Pohakaloa training area are. I've heard them talk about wanting to do tremendous expansion. They just found water up there, but also the Army is downsizing. Personally, like a lot of people, I'm really concerned about the environmental impacts of military activity in Hawaii, the social impacts. And so I'm wondering what's the future plans for Pohakaloa. I'm also concerned about our economic dependence on the military. I'd rather see our economy more diversified and local, but just PTA, what's happening?
Thank you. There's nothing really to report with respect to PTA. The SPIA, the Supplemental Programmatic Environmental Assessment that has been in the news over the last 6 weeks or so, contemplates a downsizing of the Army presence mostly on Oahu. And that is a sort of worst case scenario from, maybe not for you, but a worst case scenario from the standpoint of our fiscal constraints in terms of sequestration. PTA is kind of in a steady state right now, and my perspective from the Oahu perspective, given what happened in Makua Valley, is that I think PTA has to be done with tremendous sensitivity. but I think it does provide a great opportunity for the Big Island. I also think that there are a lot of folks who want to make sure that it's done right, whether they be people who enjoy hunting or people who enjoy the natural environment. They may not have an objection to the Army's presence, but they want to make sure that they're good neighbors. And so part of my job is to communicate with the Department of Defense generally and the Department of the Army to make sure that to the extent that anything grows on the Big Island or anywhere else, that it's done the right way. And so that's going to be my focus continuing. But just generally speaking, there are a lot of friends of mine in the environmental community with whom I disagree on this general proposition, which is I think there are folks who are anxious to see the downsizing of the military in the state of Hawaii. I don't think that would be in our to our benefit, and I'll continue to fight to maintain the Department of Defense's presence across the state of Hawaii, but I think it ought to be done with great sensitivity and it ought to be done right.
Good evening, Senator. My name is Leonard Woods. I'm with the University Student Success Programs in Hilo. And I'd first like to thank you for your efforts to help our students graduate throughout Hawaii with less educational debt. My question is this. What can you do to help or encourage the U.S. Department of Education to abide by the same regulations that they require us to abide by?
Can you give me an example of where they are?
We're given deadlines to apply for grants. They have written in the regulations that they need to notify us by certain dates, 90 days before the start of the program, but nonetheless they always seem to miss that, and we're lucky if we get notice a month after the grants are supposed to be there.
Well, let me follow up on the particulars of that, because I think part of this is my philosophy about being in the Senate on your behalf. There are policy issues which are broader, and so let me attack the kind of policy side of it. The Higher Education Act hopefully will be reauthorized this year, and I think there's a real chance of that. And in that, we can make policy to make sure that the Department of Education writ large is abiding by their own rules. But I would also say that as I work on policy stuff, and when you're doing national policy and when you're working in the Senate, you have to have some patience, right? Things take a while. In the meantime, we're not afraid of a little troubleshooting. So if in the meantime, if an agency needs a nudge or a letter or a phone call, that's why I brought my staff, that's why they're here. So let us kind of service you at the micro level, but also work with you on the macro level to change the policy.
Thank you, Senator, for coming and sharing your time with us. My name is Dr. Leonard Horowitz, and I'm also in public health. I have a Harvard degree in public health, and I'm largely responsible for this county being the first county in the United States to oppose mandatory vaccinations. We have a wonderful county council, and I also was helpful with our wonderful councilwoman Margaret Willey and Brenda Ford, who passed the GMO, the anti-GMO issue that's currently now at state level and potentially even involving some federal issues. I've heard, as you have, the issues of healthcare being of great concern and foremost concern to virtually everyone. And my story, before my question, give you a little background, is tragic. It's outrageous. It's unreal. I moved from Massachusetts, from Boston, and then Idaho to here to establish a rural health center for humanitarian medicine. We purchased about 27 acres in Puna, in actually Pahoa, towards Kalapana. And we had all great intentions. I work with the World Organization for Natural Medicine. I have connections all over the world to some of the finest natural healers, and of course with all of the magnificent natural resources that we have here on this magnificent island. We have so much that we can do in natural medicine and prevention. So my purpose was to establish this wonderful rural health center, and for the last now dozen years, we have been devastated by organized crime, by the dysfunction within in our own court systems, We had to literally, the overriding organization, we had to go insolvent, and we're basically now having to look at bankruptcy. My personal investments with the organization, over $6 million in essence to try to get started on this very important issue, because as most people know, not only is the Hilo community and the Kona community lacking health services, but particularly the natives here have an abysmal access to health care. So we had all great intentions, and what we have found is that we have been devastated by the manipulations of the lawyers and the expense of the lawyers that actually are like a little clique. They engage in covert actions behind closed doors, making decisions, and they actually operate within the Third Circuit court system here, where the judges basically rubber stamp, like you heard in the last speaker. It's a double standard that the lawyers can get away with certain things, but pro se litigants, particularly those who are engaging in community activism and humanitarian medicine to bless this community, as it should be, have no access. So my question is, good citizens are being railroaded by organized crime, the illegal drug mob, the lack of legal and aid resources, and judicial misconduct on the Big Island. Our police are great at issuing traffic tickets, but abysmal at prosecuting white-collar organized crime. Prosecutor's office has no really white-collar crime committee or handlers, agents, and racketeering is ongoing. So the question really is, what can we do to create a pro se legal aid agency and stop crime gangs from influencing and damaging our communities?
Thank you for the question, and let me say this. If I had a pat answer for that one, I don't know what you should think of me. Let me do it this way, because your question is a serious one, and it just so happens that two of the several people that I introduced from my staff are lawyers. No, three, at least. I'm not the lawyer, but let me take that question back and try to get back to you in writing, because I don't think I'm not prepared to answer that question in a meaningful way without doing some serious thinking and research.
Hi, my name is Tina Cortelli. I'm Leilani Suzaki, and we're currently third-year pharmacy students at the Daniel K. Inouye College of Pharmacy here, and our question for you today is about provider status. Good evening, Senator. So currently most Hawaii residents on Medicare do not have access to important services provided by pharmacists, including chronic disease management, which includes diabetes and heart disease, drug therapy management, preventative screenings, and related counseling and education. If HR 592 and S 314 become law, pharmacists, a qualified and underutilized healthcare provider, can help address the needs of Hawaii's medically underserved. So we just ask you to please support Senate Bill 314 to recognize pharmacists as healthcare providers under Medicare Part B.
Okay, thank you for that. And let me give you kind of a conceptual thing, and I'm going to ask you a question too. Although I don't know if you're the right ones to ask, because you're the pharmacists in training, not the lawmakers in training. But first of all, just so you know, my father's a physician, right? So when I started as a policymaker, I came from a physician's perspective in terms of jurisdiction, right? And making sure that whenever possible, a physician was delivering clinical services. And as I learned, I entered public office when I was 26, I'm now 42, and as I learned, I started to understand that nurses, psychologists, versus psychiatrists in some instances, other trained healthcare professionals, pharmacists included, can and should be part of the delivery of care. And so I've grown in that area. I used to be kind of a hardliner in this space, and now I really believe that both from a clinical standpoint, from a human standpoint, and from a managing cost standpoint, that whenever possible, if you can have a trained professional who's capable to do the work, but may not be paid at the MD level, that everybody wins. And so this is something that I'd be strongly inclined to support. I guess my practical, technical question is whether this is before the legislature or the Congress, because I don't even know who makes those decisions about who's allowed to give care?
There's the House of Representatives Bill 592 and then the Senate 1314.
But this is in the legislature, right? Okay, we'll follow up. I got it. I'm sorry, I should have known that, but I didn't.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Palmier, that's right. And then Kibo Makayo.
Aloha. I'm challenged because I think it would really take courage to examine the Pohakaloa issue. And I'm afraid it sounds like that courage is not coming from you. This is a very serious environmental issue for this island. And as you know, in Oahu they've had a similar issue, and of course have a whole island that is uninhabitable because of the military's misuse of the land here. This is a serious problem, Senator Schatz, and I hope that you'll reconsider your stand on it and look into. I was a part of some of the negotiations that occurred regarding giving a license to the Army to have nuclear material at Pohakaloa. They refused to admit they had it for the longest time. Now they admit they haven't even applied for a license after the fact, which is outrageous. Our country shouldn't permit that. And I'm not an anti-military person. I believe that all the people in the military are from my stage of living. You know, I'm a working person. I have to work every day, and they do too. And they're doing a job. But we're putting them in harm's way by putting them with depleted uranium and other very serious environmental effects. So I'd ask you to reconsider your stance. To me, it's shameful. I apologize for being so blunt, but it really is. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you will reconsider that.
Thank you. I appreciate what your passion, and I know you come by it honestly. And my perspective, I come by it honestly as well. Look, I think we are still in military conflict in many places across the planet, and we are now considering an authorization of the use of military force to go against ISIL. And my view is that it is our obligation, to the degree and extent that we're going to engage in military action, that we have to provide proper training. And PTA is part of that equation. I understand the concerns that you're articulating, but I really believe that that there are no shortcuts, that to the extent that we authorize the use of military force, that we ought to, in the same authorization, authorize the Veterans Administration services that are going to be necessary for PTSD, for traumatic brain injury, for environmental remediation. So I think we really ought to look at this from a holistic standpoint. But I think you and I are just going to disagree about the appropriateness of PTA existing at all.
Well, that might be true, but I do think that we should both look at history and see what actually is the history about how the planning has gone forth in protecting our young people who we ask to sacrifice their lives far away for oil companies.
Kimo and Laurel Trammell.
Hello, Mrs. Schatz. I'd like to say I'm glad that I voted for you. You're doing a good job. Wow. I was born and raised here in Hilo. My name is Kimo Makayo. I was brought up in Kilkaha. I'm going to ask you to make plans right now. I'm not asking, I'm telling you to make plans to move the Hilo airport, to take the noise away from this old ears. It's been happening too much and too often now, especially since Gil Kahele wants to bring his pilot program here, which is fantastic. I'm asking you to move the airport where the sewer plant is at. Besides moving the airport, I want you to move the dump with it also. Talk to the mayor, he can take his incinerator and put it by the sewer plant. You can also build the medium prison there and open up the prison for the state of Hawaii and bring back the other 1,200 that Abercrombie promised that he would do. I was in corrections, he only brought back 200 sexual offenders to Kulani. That doesn't cut it. Now, the reason I'm asking you to move the airport is this. I was in tourism from 1972 to 92. Hilo Kona was isolated with a small airport behind the King Kamehameha Hotel. But the Kamehameha Hotel went up in stories. We moved the airport 11 miles away.
Hang on. The airport was where the King Cam Hotel was?
It was right in the back, where you call the
Did
old
you guys know
airport
that?
beach. The old airport beach park. That's it.
That's neat.
Right behind Kailua. We moved out 11 miles to get the airport away from Kailua Kona. The Mauna Kea Beach Hotel and the Kona Village was already there. Already had plans that the mega resorts are going to move in. They did. That's the reason why the Queen Kahumana Highway came in, which is another problem I need to talk to you about. Where's my freeways? Eileen Hill told me we want to end up like Honolulu. I said if Honolulu didn't have the freeways, it'd be in gridlock right now, the whole island. I'm only asking for 3. Puna, Kona, Kamoela. But coming back to the airport, the infrastructure of Kailua Kona is caught up to the airport. It's right behind it, right on the southern tip of the airport. Your mega resorts are already moving down. They're about to catch up to the northern part of the airport. There's no way they can expand. The only way they can build is making a man-made airfield into the ocean. Well, we tried to do that with our breakwater here. They dumped it because the water's too deep. You need to move that airport to let progress happen. That airport in Kona, I believe, is going to turn into a private jet airport. It's already there. There's more private jets at the airport than commercial flights, the way I see it. So we got to be bearing Hilo because the only place you got to move is to Hilo again. We need to move that airport, so please help us out.
Okay, thank you.
And that highway, 3 of them, okay?
Laurel Trammell and then
So part of
Kay Howe.
chemotherapy.
If anybody else has a question card that I don't have yet, please feel free to bring it up to me.
Aloha, my name is Laurel Trammell. I also have a healthcare question, but first, I know the vote was unanimous, but I want to tell you thank you anyway for voting for the Clay Hunt Act for suicide prevention for veterans. That's really, my husband served, and as a spouse of a veteran, it's really, really, really important. I'm now working as a special education teacher, and I work at a very small school. So we don't have a lot of the staff members that other people have. And as a sped teacher, I get collateral responsibilities. So suicide prevention, unfortunately, has affected me with multiple students. So my question is about suicide prevention in our community, and it has kind of 2 pieces to that. The first piece is the crisis hotline, which I think is a statewide level crisis hotline. It's also published the phone number under the suicide prevention hotline. I have never called the suicide prevention hotline and had them answer on the first call. It rings and rings and rings until it stops ringing, and then it stops.
So let's take them one at a time.
Well, I've also called more than 7 times in a row where it rings and hangs up, it rings and hangs up, and it took me more than 20 minutes of dialing and dialing and dialing to get an answering machine for the suicide prevention hotline. So that was very disturbing.
So the reason I'm anxious to talk to you about this is that, so I used to be the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Helping Hands Hawaii. And we had the contract at the time from the Department of Health to run the suicide crisis center. And it was called, back then it was run by, you had clinical supervision, but it was all volunteers. It was 24/7, and it was called a warm line, which meant that sometimes you were in the business, these volunteers, they were all trained, but sometimes they were in the business of full-on crisis intervention, suicide prevention, but a lot of times someone's calling at 3 a.m. because they need to speak to a human being. And it was a relatively small contract. Actually, my nonprofit organization lost money every year, but we had dozens of volunteers doing it, and then the state, in its wisdom, decided that it would be better to move it in-house within the Department of Health. And I thought it was the darndest negotiation, because I was fighting to keep a program where we ran a $70,000 annual loss. And so I feel so deeply about not just this issue generally, although I do, but about the lack of wisdom displayed in terms of what we had, which was this community resource that was inexpensive and actually worked. And anytime there was a real issue, you could patch in HPD or patch in a crisis response service team. I mean, it worked. And the government came in and decided that they could do a better job, and it is really hard to catch a human being when you need help. So I couldn't agree more, and I'd be happy to kind of redouble my efforts and have the new governor and the new administration. This is 2 governors ago when this bad decision was made, but I'd be happy to revisit it with Governor Ige, because it just matters very much to me. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I care a lot about this particular thing, and it's a battle I lost 15 years ago.
Well, the second part, I hope you'll be able to help with this part as well. But once a teenager or a family has consented to reach out for help, and as a school staff member, sometimes I'm the person that they finally say, okay, I'll talk to somebody, and then I'm trying to facilitate getting them to where they need to go. I was shocked to discover that if a teenager on the Big Island says, I'm going to hurt myself, there are 2 options. Tell the doctor you didn't mean it and go home, or get on a plane and no one will tell you when you're going to see your mom again. Because there are 0 beds on this island for a teenager in crisis. If you go to the emergency room with a child who is about to cut their wrists, they tell them, if you say you're going to hurt yourself, we're going to put you on a plane right now. I'm going to put you in an ambulance and take you to the airport. And they won't say when you come home. They won't say, they just tell you we're taking you to Oahu. Some of my students have never been off this island. To be in crisis and to be told, we're taking you away from your family, you will have no control over when you see your family doesn't have the money to get on a plane and come check on you. So just throw yourself on the mercy of the state, or just nod and say, no, I didn't mean it, and go home. And I have seen it happen more than 1 time in less than a year with different students. It's terrifying that a child who's 16 or 17 who has said, I have a plan to hurt myself, I have the means to hurt myself, I will probably hurt myself. And this gets the crisis mobile outreach people to drive over to our school and talk to the child. And then they have to recant their story, or the child perceives, you're taking me away to jail. That's the student's perception. So it is really a significantly higher barrier for a teenager on the Big Island to get help than a child on Oahu.
Well, thank you for both. First of all, thank you for caring so much and knowing so much about this issue. On the second question, I don't have an easy answer for you, but we'll follow up. It's certainly not, I mean, it's not really federal policy, but we can certainly dig into it and see what, whether this is, these are Department of Health regs, how many beds would suffice, because really although it's probably not a high number of beds to just have available. If you had 2, but yeah, that's what I was thinking. If you had a bed on each side, that would be a start. And some of them can be, as you know, they can be flexed. So there may be solutions here, but let me follow up on that one without giving you an uninformed answer.
Kay Howe and then Buddy Smith. And just to flag, we have 15 minutes left, so we may not get to all the questions.
Hello, that's Senator Schatz. You sure are getting an earful tonight. Thank you so much for listening to all of the things we have to say. And I want to say that I'm here also, my advisor, Dr. Susan Jarvie at the Daniel K. Inouye College of Pharmacy couldn't be here tonight, so I'm speaking on behalf of both of us. And I'm going to read this to keep it short. Hawaii is the epicenter for rat lungworm disease in the United States. It's generally assumed that most people become infected via accidental ingestion of an infected slug or snail on produce. However, the majority of victims here don't really know how they were infected. Water transmission is another possibility which needs to be thoroughly investigated. I did those studies. The Hawaii Island Rat Lungworm Working Group, housed in the University of Hawaii Hilo Daniel K. Inouye College of Pharmacy, Susan Jarvie is PI there, has the most active research and educational outreach program in the state. Over the past 3 years time period, we've applied for 11 grants, with 5 of them being funded, however, at relatively low levels of funding, less than $120,000 from in-house and private organizations. We've received no state or federal funds, and with these funds, we've conducted a number of studies, including optimizing an antibody-based diagnostic, which will be the first diagnostic test available in Hawaii, which is a preferable method of detection over evaluating cerebrospinal fluid. This disease has caused mortality and morbidity primarily on Hawaii Islands, where more than 90% of the cases occur. And as you know, Hawaii Island has the largest number of households on catchment in the state. This is no doubt costing the state of Hawaii enormous amounts of money toward hospitalization and long-term care and loss of income for victims and their families. These funds would be better put towards prevention by increased educational outreach and research. Senator Schatz, what could you do to help us initiate better cooperation, communication, and collaboration and funding by the CDC, the USDA, and the Hawaii State Departments of Health and Agriculture to bring this critical issue to the forefront to better protect the health and the residents of Hawaii? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for what you do. And I actually got briefed about this issue on the way here, and I didn't quite understand the sort of scale of this crisis on Hawaii Island. And that's the bad news. The good news is that we have the College of Pharmacy and the University of Hawaii at Hilo, who's in a position to do something about it. And so, without promising, certain dollar amounts, I was thinking NIH, CDC, perhaps USDA, and the local Department of Health and the Department of Health and Human Services nationally are the right places to look. One of the things that we do with regularity, and I can commit to you that we'll do that in this instance, is that anytime an agency, a not-for-profit organization, we're careful about for-profits, but generally any not-for-profit organization that's doing good work, or any government that has a high-quality endeavor, we try to steer federal funds towards those programs. We have to do it on a kind of ecumenical basis. We can't play favorites, especially among people within Hawaii, but there are instances where we can find little pockets of money, and I'd be happy to work with you on this because I now fully understand how much of a public health crisis it is.
It is definitely a public health crisis here on Hawaii Island, and it's not just affecting people, it's affecting farm animals, horses, dogs. It really seriously needs to be addressed at this point in time, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Buddy Smith and then George Nakamoto.
Here tonight. I want to commend you. I got some information from Common Cause that said that you and other colleagues had signed on to challenge the Citizens United movement. And I'm very pleased. Very, very, very. Okay. The other thing is, I just found out I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. And I just found out that you had publicly announced you plan to not attend the meeting when Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu speaks in Congress. And I thank you for that, because I think that was not an appropriate thing. I also urge you to please do what you can in speaking with your colleagues to move our Congress towards looking for justice for Palestine. It's the instability that whole situation creates is very detrimental for our foreign policy and for the whole Middle East, and in fact for that larger area of the world. Please do what you can. Thank you very, very much.
Is George not here? George not here? Then Denise Lattinen. Oh, sorry. George Nakamoto, Denise Lattinen. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your names. Oh, here. Great.
Hi, Brian. You mentioned LBZ trees, and you and I have discussed that in the past. You know it's a big issue. We had an unnamed storm event this past weekend on the island, in which 5,000 people were without power. Now during Gazelle, we had warning and people could prepare. There were 5,000 families in Puna that had no warning with this last weekend's windstorm. For people who are not familiar with the extent of the damage that we experienced down there, nearly every single side street in Nana Valley was blocked by albizia trees. Again, this weekend I spent 3 hours driving around assessing the damage. Leilani had extensive damage, Nana Valley had extensive damage. When you mention the albizia trees, realistically, and knowing that we can't cut down everybody's trees, and it's not that they're on their yards, they're on vacant lots, they're on state land, it's a big issue. What are we talking monetarily in terms of the amount of funding that Puna can expect to help with eradication? Because BISC is doing great work, and their eradication efforts are working.
Thank you for the question. I don't have the number in front of me. Springer, do you remember what the total annual budget was in our proposal, which is sort of still a working draft? Well, let's do it this way, because I think we want to kind of refine the question, because Springer's job in this context is to kind of describe the scope of the problem, and my job is to try to make it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to until we're able to actually make a dent. And so,
and my job is to keep reminding you so that Puna can get the help that it needs.
Absolutely, but I just want to make sure that there were a couple of scenarios, and I think the more realistic, narrow one was major thoroughfares, easements next to the electricity infrastructure and such. And I was remembering a $6 to $7 million price tag between federal, state, county, and HELCO. Is that about what you remember?
Right, so looking at just the top 5 to 6 priority stretches of road for county, state, and for HELCO, those primary transmission lines, it was a $6.8 million budget. HELCO is essentially committed to their portion of that, which is more than a third. The state, at the state level, we have a $2.1 million bill. That's $2.1 million per year for 2 years to move that albizia control across the state, not just here in Hawaii. And then for the county, we're really a bit at a loss. There's 2 other pots of money we're trying to track down, which is FEMA hazard mitigation funds. We've made about 50 phone calls, and no one knows how much money is available, who knows how much money is available, or what that money is going to be spent for. It supposedly exists. And then there's another housing and urban development program that we'd really like to go after, but we need that federal link to figure out how to do it.
Okay, so this is good. Excuse us for having a working meeting right now, but it's good. And I mean, this is your government when it's working properly. So we're going to continue to work on it. And I want to thank you for not letting up on this. I really do think this is a team effort. The only kind of modification I'd offer is that there is a bill at the legislature, and it's a $2.1 million annual appropriation for 2 years, so that's great. But I think the Hawaii State Department of Transportation ought to use some of their operating funds, which they have money set aside for tree trimming and the rest of it, and really start focusing on the albizia problem, because there are lower priority projects that the Department of Transportation, it's not their fault, Highways Division funds, and I think albizia is more of an urgent need, at least in certain areas. The one thing I'll say is the deeper you get into side streets and private roads and non-county and non-state roads, the more difficult it becomes for me to look you in the eye and say we're going to be able to handle this. So I think one final point. We really do, sometimes it's a cop-out to say, well, we need to educate the public about this. But I do think when it comes to albizia trees, that if we're talking about a 10 or 20-year plan to really get this thing under control, people need to know what they're getting into on their property. They need to know what's growing on their property, and they need to get after it kind of quick before it gets totally out of control. I think we were more successful with Myconia. We've been, but people think it's a big and beautiful tree, and if you have a big and beautiful tree that is growing fast, you generally don't think of that as a bad thing. until it's too big and it's brittle and it creates real danger. But I think there's a public education aspect of this that's not trivial and not a cop-out, because people do need eventually to take responsibility for their own property. And that's part of the challenge. But in the Puna district in particular, you've got vacant landowners, and so the offending trees are often adjacent to people who are in danger of getting crushed. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And the issue isn't, you know, it's bothersome to hear people say cut your own trees when most of us have, and it's the absentee homeowners. But thank you for addressing this.
Thank you. One final question, if we have one.
Grace Ewing. Nope.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here and to hear you speak and be among a town hall meeting like this, because I'm a graduate from Manoa, a master's in 2014 and a BA in 2012. So I've been married to the computer and with our students here in the community. And I believe in the backbone of America. And I'm a veteran. And I understand. And we have to keep you informed. So, my parents, my dad, my mother, but my dad was a colonel in the Air Force. And they lived through the time period where immunization wasn't there. They were born in 1916 and 1917. But I also know that we need to go to the level of health. And if we have to restudy immunization and assess what we're really concerned about, then I agree with that. So maybe there can be something done about that. But I'm also a vet from the Vietnam era. My father was there in Vietnam. In fact, he was in every war, and the last war was Vietnam. He's buried in Arlington, Virginia. And as we all want to keep our ancestors alive, I want to say his name on this microphone because I've never said it out loud, and it's Colonel John Woodrow Berkeley. And he's buried in Arlington, Virginia. And I know he's proud of me talking up for this, because when he left Vietnam, he left because they were at the end, 1970, 71. And his heart of hearts was, we needed education. We needed to reach the people there in Vietnam. America isn't about conquering, America is about educating. And if the soldiers could be used as educators, as they are, they're always attentive to the young children, we might be able to communicate better about women's rights and relationships. And then he realized, what is the United Nations all about? And we studied it as a family, and we aren't using them enough. We need to have a mediator to understand what America's trying to say. Because when it came down to it, in Ayatollah Khomeini period, my high school time, the silent majority, which I'm a member of, and this is very difficult for me to talk here, but I'm proud of myself too, and I give credit to UH for that. Where I'm coming from is that the silent majority spoke up really loud. We were going to stand up against Ayatollah Khomeini, and we did. And we stood up against tyranny. It takes us a while to get momentum, but I'm proud of this, because we're not always jumping into things. And I think if we speak out loud, like France has recognized our efforts and has honored us in different ways, I think the other European countries need to do that as well. And I think as a senator, as our other senators could communicate, we're compassionate people. And during World War II, many of the families cooked out of their fields. They're called victory gardens. And they gave where they had nothing. And it was shipped over there. And we want peace on this globe. And that's what the immunization and about education and being caring about all of this. So my question is this to you. Can you spread that word among the other senators and push for it?
Yes.
Okay, now my other thing is, and my biggest gripe is our Social Security. AARP reports in one of their magazines that there's millions and millions and millions of dollars that are misappropriated. And then in a little block inside of the magazine, it says, by this lawyer, retired lawyer, says it's so complicated to keep the accounting straight, that there's so many loopholes, and there's people looking for loopholes. We're not talking about $100 or $1,000. We're talking about millions. One person got away with $90 million. But he said the accounting and researching through the Social Security is really difficult. Can that be changed, and how? And have you discussed that, or are you in a committee, or is there a committee facing this, because it needs to be faced? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, I'll answer that question and then I'll wrap up. On Social Security fraud, look, any big government program, any big private sector program is going to have people who try to take advantage of it. But the average Social Security benefit is $14,000 a year. And the majority of Social Security recipients, it's their primary source of income. And so I really do believe it's a covenant we have with people who have worked all their life and had their taxes withheld for that purpose. And it is something we all rely on, rich or poor or in between, and all of us have family members or are on Social Security right now. I really think that there ought to be bipartisan consensus about a few things, but among them is that the government made a promise, and now it has to keep that promise. And the fiscal crisis facing Social Security is nothing compared to the fiscal crisis facing seniors, who are now living longer and longer and have greater and greater expenses. So you have my commitment to continue to advocate for Social Security. Let me just say one last thing. I had a lot of fun tonight, so I just wanted to say how much I appreciate how diverse the questions were, how passionate, how knowledgeable all of you are, how civilized the conversation is, even those who think I'm wrong or think I'm a coward or whatever it may be. We all find a way to engage in this democratic process. It really is one of the greatest parts of my job, that I get to hear from you and listen to you and have this wonderful staff that gets to work on the basis of what you have recommended this evening. So I want to thank everybody for organizing this evening. I want to thank everybody for spending more than 90 minutes with me in this not terribly cool cafeteria, or maybe I'm the only one that's hot, but I really do appreciate you guys all participating, hanging in there, and having my first town hall of 2015. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator, for addressing us this evening. And just a couple of final points. Again, you know, if you want to stay and talk story for a while, you know, you've got some seconds and thirds and some fourths here. But there were a lot of heartfelt expressions of passion tonight. And I just appreciate the Senator advocating for us and being with us for this town meeting this evening. Thank you, Senator.
Well, you know, it never happened.